Hello, everybody. I hope the quarantine is treating you all as well as can possibly be expected, and maybe even better. Some I know are making the most of it and finding creative ways to spend their time and being really productive. And that's some of what I want to talk about today. Um, I actually had a very hard week myself. I don't know if others have had that as well. I know there's things in the air right now that are troubling, and people are kind of finding it harder and harder to feel like they're being stuck at home, especially if you don't have an income or you don't know where your income is going to be coming from. Because not everybody's been able to get unemployment. Not everybody has been able to figure out how to make this work. So I know that some people are really having a hard time right now. So my heart goes out to you if this is you. But I can promise you that if you are having a hard time right now, there is an answer because every problem has a solution. You just may not be seeing it yet. So I follow Dane Here's advice where he talks about what about this is right that I'm not getting? And that's a question you can ask yourself when you're in a sticky situation that doesn't seem like it's going to have any kind of an end that could be good for you. I guarantee there's a solution someplace. You just may not have seen it yet. So ask yourself that question. What about this is right that I'm not getting? And maybe something will come to light, especially if you use the process of writing that I have described to you so many times with free writing, where you write the question and then you allow yourself to randomly write whatever comes into your head in response, and write at least 5 minutes. 10 is better, but just write and see what comes. If nothing comes of it, if you don't get answers, do it again and do it again and do it again. Just keep doing it. You can do it time after time. You can do it for an hour if you want, or you can just keep trying it day after day until something comes to you, because eventually you'll crack through that exterior of your ego that is preventing you, because you're so used to living in the ego potentially that your subconscious is too deeply buried. And your subconscious has answers because it's been looking in your environment for things that you may just not have been paying attention to. So you've got to ask yourself those questions and you will find answers eventually. So you just got to give it time sometimes. Be patient with yourself. But back to my difficult week, I have a couple of cats here, which I've mentioned, that I've been fostering. And of course, as usual, you get attached to these animals, even if you've only had them a short time. And one of the cats who's been here, I brought home two because they came to the shelter together and I didn't want to separate them. I felt like it was better for them to be together. So they came home with me together. And things seemed pretty good until this last week when he started not doing well. He stopped eating. He wasn't acting like himself, and I brought him to the vet and we got him some medication. They said that it looked like he was having liver trouble, and so we put him on some meds. But then the meds didn't work. He didn't respond to the treatment, and his liver basically grew a tumor in a week. It was astonishing to me that it could happen that fast. But yesterday, the decision was to euthanize him, which I agreed with because I don't feel like an animal should suffer. And while they offered chemotherapy and all of this other stuff, that's very expensive. It's on the county to pay for that. And I did not feel like that was a good decision personally. And I agreed with their decision to say, let's not make this animal suffer, since the animal is going to continue suffering if we put him on these medications that may not even work. So it's hard enough for a human to go through chemotherapy when you have that mindset of hope, when an animal has no idea what you're doing. All they know is that they just feel terrible, they're sick, and they don't want to live. This cat clearly was in terrible distress. So I felt like it was humane to end the suffering, which is what we did yesterday. I'm trying not to cry right now. It was really hard for me. I'm actually really struggling with this grief, which is I'm surprised by. I usually handle end of life experiences pretty smoothly. Especially when you're talking about a person or an animal who's lived a long life and you know that their suffering has ended. For me, I usually feel like that's a relief to me. That I know not everybody feels that way because attachment is different for everyone, but I feel that way because the ending of that suffering to me is a kindness. That's a gentle way that the universe kind of moves that person through the transition away from this life into whatever you may believe is the next step. Maybe you believe there is nothing else after this. I don't believe that. I believe we all are made of energy, and the energy just changes. You can see whatever you want to see in that, but either way, the ending of suffering to me is a kindness. So it's been surprising to me that the grief of the situation for this loss has actually affected me the way that it has. It's actually really made me very sad. I've missed this cat quite a bit, even though I still have another one here. I'm not totally alone, but I think part of it is just having company in this quarantine has been more of a comfort than I realized. I mean, I appreciated it, don't get me wrong, but I think the comfort being there has really meant more to me than I think I even understood until I lost it. And then, of course, compound that with the energy of the world going around right now, where everyone is feeling a grief or sense of loss of the lifestyle that they once led, or maybe the work that they had, that security they once felt, or the concern of loss of life because so many lives are being lost to this disease. And then, of course, lives being lost for other reasons not related to the disease, and then we aren't able to grieve the way that we would normally grieve by getting together and saying goodbye. And it was a strange experience yesterday when I had to sit in the vet's office, and while they were incredibly kind and sweet and gentle with this animal, there we were covered in our masks, and it was just odd. It was odd. And I'm not, and I think, all of it collectively is just, it's just odd. And so I feel deeply the sense of loss, and it's just a really weird experience. But I think that a lot of it has to do with what currently is happening in the world right now, and we can't ignore that. Whether we are experiencing personal loss or not, I think we are experiencing globally a loss of life as we knew it, and it's affecting all of us. Whether we recognize it or not, we are experiencing that loss. So, in that space, I actually wrote a poem today and I put it up on Instagram. And I put a quote from Carrie Fisher that said, "Take your broken heart, make it into art." And to me, that is the same thing as saying, transmute your grief. Rather than allowing grief to tear you down and wipe you out, which, feel the grief. I'm not saying stuff it away, don't have the grief, ignore the grief. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is transmute the grief. Feel the grief, be present with the grief, give yourself the space to be filled with it if you must, and really allow yourself to move through it, because that is healthy and normal. And grief is a strange experience, not like any other emotion. It's a very deep and wild emotion. I don't think we can really tame it. I think it comes when it wants to. And it comes at odd moments when you're going to not expect it. I mean, my grandfather died 30 years ago, and there are still moments where I have a striking moment of loss for him because he's not in my life. Even though it's been 30 years, I've spent more years alive without him than with him. So still, grief is a wild animal. So transmute grief is the intention this week, and I really truly hope that we can all find a way to utilize grief instead of allowing grief to run our show, that we transmute the grief into something powerful. Be creative, be loving with yourself about it, but find a way to do service utilizing that grief as fuel. Use your grief as fuel. Find a way to expend that energy in a beautiful way that helps you or helps humanity. And then perhaps, just maybe, we'll be the few who can help the rest of the people around us transmute it too. So I hope you have a good week, and I will see you next Saturday.